If you didn't believe in Joe Hendry after his theme song, where he tells you to, after last week's Impact, you should probably start believing in Joe Hendry after he and Matt Cardona put on a very entertaining episode of Impact Wrestling. I've been kind of talking about Impact for the past month and how since Hard to Kill, it's kind of been half-assed. But I do think last week's episode was certainly the best episode of Impact since Hard to Kill. And Matt Cardona and Joe Hendry are the reasons for that. Let's first talk about Matt Cardona, because as great and entertaining as Joe Hendry can be, when you have a wrestler like Matt Cardona who is not afraid to be the butt of the joke completely and can do the comedy sides of wrestling, it makes what they're doing that much better. And the thread throughout the night was the build to that main event, where when Matt arrives to the arena, he's brought to a locker room where there's champagne and shrimp cocktail, only to find out it's actually Joe Hendry's locker room. And when Matt Cardona is brought to his locker room, it's basically like a closet. So that was part one in the night of the comedy between Cardona and Hendry. The whole feud has kind of been Hendry making that song about Cardona being Edge's bitch, kind of along with Brian Myers as well. So we got the main event. It's probably the better build to any match this month, despite a pay-per-view coming up for Impact Wrestling. I thought the build to this match has been the best of anything, and this was on a main event of Impact. Hendry does pick up the win for the digital media title, retaining his title after Brian Myers tries to interfere but accidentally takes out Cardona instead. Maybe we will get some turmoil between those best friends, although the Impact's kind of done that before, but never far enough. But it can happen here. And then even after the match, Moose comes out, who's still upset with Joe Hendry as well. Moose just lost to him at Hard to Kill. But Moose ends up hitting Cardona instead as well when Hendry moves out of the way again. So Cardona got it from everyone in the main event, having all of the egg on his face. But he gets over as well, being this entertaining guy who, he has all this confidence, but he's kind of being made to be the fool here. It would be nice if this gives us a new change in direction for the character. I think that would be even better for Cardona if that is where they're going. But yes, Joe Hendry continues to be one of the most entertaining parts of Impact Wrestling for me. In January, when I did my power rankings for the best 20 wrestlers in January, I did not even mention Hendry like I should have, being outside of the 20, right outside of the 20. I had, I think, 3 people in Impact in my top 20, and most of those 3 people might be falling out in February. But Joe Hendry might have to be put in my top 20 for February, because I do think he's been the best part of Impact in February, but also the last couple of months of January as well. The other bigger things on Impact is we had the match where Dreamer and Mickie James took on Skylar and Hotch. This was kind of set up last week with Bully Ray attacking Mickie James again. I thought Mickie James did really good wrestling men. It's not my favorite thing when men wrestle women in the ring. But Mickie James was good with it, and Dreamer and her do pick up the win. The best part of this, though, was when Bully Ray comes out after the match, once again looking like he's going to attack Mickie James, but it's really just a distraction for Mickie, so Masha Slamovich can come and attack Mickie James, seeing as that is who Mickie James is taking on at the pay-per-view, and the build to that match has been very subpar. Throughout the night, we also had it's basically qualifying matches to be in the number 1 contender match at the next pay-per-view, which I don't think is all that great. I didn't like PCO basically squashing Shira. I think Shira deserves better than that. He is a good up-and-coming talent. So those wasn't my favorite parts. We also have their keep continuing the build to Trey Miguel versus Crazy Steve, where Crazy Steve's basically trying to scare him. That was fine. We did have James Mitchell return, who put a hex on Rosemary, which was basically Allison Kay and Marty Bell. Formerly, I think they were in NWA. They came and attacked the Death Dolls and kind of beat them down. So I guess that might be a setup for the women's the Knockouts tag team title. One of the bigger problems, though, I think with Impact continues to be the match that's being set up between Josh Alexander and Rich Swann. And I'm a pretty big fan of Rich Swann, but the way they've set up this match where he lost at Hard to Kill, which I have talked about, it's the booking I don't really just agree with. I don't think it was good booking because in general, nobody's going to think that Rich Swann has a chance at beating Josh Alexander for the title. But now even more so, seeing as Rich Swann just lost at the last pay-per-view, that's just not how you set up a main event for your main title. Let's kind of look at the card for Impact Wrestling's next pay-per-view. It will be February 24th. It is No Surrender. So, I talked about a lot of them here, but they did set up Deonna Purrazzo versus Giselle Shaw for the pay-per-view, where Purrazzo basically threw chili on Giselle Shaw. I don't really know what that has to do with Giselle's story that they've been building up, but I guess it's a way to set up a match. I think this whole event has just not been set up well. That's been my biggest problem with Impact since Hard to Kill. You look at this card, are you really that excited for it? Probably not, because the setup for it isn't that great. And like I said, Joe Hendry was the most entertaining part of the month, and so far he's not even announced on the card. So I don't understand or like the way they have been booking this. We will have Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin and Kushida against Bullet Club's Ace Austin, Chris Bay, and Kenta. That's a match for the hardcore fans that like their choreographed matches. The Impact number one contender match is looking like Brian Myers versus PCO. And they will either take on the winner of Macklin versus Rhino, which will likely be Macklin, and Eddie Edwards versus Heath, which I assume would be Eddie Edwards. The Knockouts Championship match is going to be Mickie James versus Masha Slamovitz, and then Josh Alexander versus Rich Swann. That is all that has been announced thus far. So yeah, I think it's a weak card because the build to it hasn't been all that great. But last week's episode of Impact was very entertaining thanks to the match I talked about. And the lead up to that match, it was a thread throughout the night. Cardona versus Joe Hendry. I think they are the MVPs of Impact Wrestling over the last 4 weeks because they're at least bringing the entertainment as we continue this poor build to No Surrender.